Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the ideal list of Brahms chamber music. Now, the ideal list means that there are no weak links in our list of suggested performances. Doesn't mean they have to be the best from of all time, and it doesn't mean that we're running down a list of 700 versions of the same thing. Merely that if you get these performances, you will have a uniformly strong and rewarding series of all of the Brahms chamber works. And one of the things that makes this sort of rewarding and easy to do is that Brahms was the kind of composer, well, he was very obsessive, as most composers are, and he was an absolute perfectionist, which is a good thing when you're writing chamber music, because he didn't write little sniglets of anything. He only wrote major works in large forms, and so they're easy to categorize and to list. And he wrote them in groups, so that's also makes our life easy. There are some singleton works too, but there are also a lot of things that come in pairs or triplets, and so we can put them all together in a clump, and that makes our task enormously easier too. There aren't that many of them. There's also a manageable number here. In fact, I think if you add them all up, there are about 24, roughly. Maybe 23, 24, 25, somewhere in there. I mean, I haven't counted them all. It doesn't make any difference. But that's about what the number is. People really misunderstand the kind of composer Brahms was. It's really kind of fascinating because, of course, he's famous for the music which occurs least in his output. That is, the orchestral works, the symphonies. There are only a dozen orchestral works or so. Very, very few, right? 4 symphonies, 4 concertos, 2 serenades, 2 overtures. So that's 12. That's a dozen. And the Haydn variations, 13. That's basically the Brahms orchestral works. After that, we get the chamber works, about 24 or so, twice as many as there are orchestral works. And then there's this huge raft of stuff that most people don't know. If you actually listed Brahms' music in order of frequency, the amount of time he spent on it and how much of it there is, he was, first and foremost, a song composer. I mean, there are more than 200 songs. After that, there are choral works or vocal ensemble pieces, of which there are countless dozens, because that's what he did for a living. I mean, when he was actually making a living, besides being a composer or a pianist, he was a choral conductor. He conducted a choir in Vienna, or a couple of them, and that's what he did early in his career. He wrote tons and tons of music. So there's the choral works, then the chamber works, then the orchestral works at the bottom of the pyramid. I mean, at the top of the pyramid. You turn the pyramid upside down. It's an inverted pyramid, okay? So you get songs, choral and vocal ensembles, chamber, and orchestral. Teeny, tiny little point down at the bottom. And that's what he did. So the chamber works are closer to the rarefied stuff. And that raises another issue, which is the intimidation factor. And that's very, very real. Classical music has its subsets, its subsidiaries, and the orchestral stuff is the most popular, which is why I talk about it more than anything else. And chamber music is among the less popular. Opera is its own universe. Choral music is also its own universe. Songs and leader and voice things they bleed into opera and choral stuff and voice people, but that's a universe, and chamber music is a universe. And it's one that has a very, very high intimidation factor because chamber music, first of all, is not as colorful as orchestral music, so it relies more on what you might call, different musical elements for its appeal. And maybe it requires a little bit more intense listening than flashier types of music do. And beyond that, it tends to be, people have an attitude about it. It's so sublime, it's amazing, it's incredible, that you have to be some sort of, pinhead intellectual elitist in order to really enjoy chamber music. That's really a shame because it's totally not true. And I've talked about some of Brahms' chamber music works like the sextets, which are glorious. And you don't have to have any special anything to enjoy them. But Brahms himself believed in the elitist factor in his chamber music, and that infects some of it. And so the thing that you need to know about the Brahms chamber music, frankly, is that you don't have to like it all. You listen to it. Some of it's better than others. There's this tendency to say, oh, it's all wonderful. It's all fabulous. I mean, I say it too sometimes. I mean, I do, but I mean it in a lighthearted way. What I don't mean is that you should not use your powers of judgment to decide what appeals to you and what doesn't, or that if you don't like all of it equally well and think it's all just the utmost in sublimity, that there's something wrong with you. That's not true. This is all out there for you to enjoy, for you to pick and choose, and that's what you should do. So the reason I'm going through this idea list is so that you have a big list of stuff, and so you know what's out there, what it is, and you can just approach it at your leisure. You like what you like, and you don't like what you don't like. Some of it I don't like, and I'm going to talk about it very, very frankly. Very frankly, because, what's the point of wasting time on something you don't like? And so I that's one way to deal with the issue of the intimidation factor in chamber music. It's there to please you. You're the consumer. It's for you. That's one thing. The other thing is, again, not to be overawed by the fact that it's chamber music. I mean, chamber music in essence is a performer's medium. It really is. It was made to have a bunch of friends sit around at home and do it in their living room. And let me tell you, I happen to have the good fortune to have friends who can play chamber music, who can play the Brahms chamber music, which is not easy to play by any stretch of the imagination. And every New Year's we get together in this tiny little room on Hudson Street in the Village, and we all play. I listen, I don't play, I turn pages. I turn pages for the pianist as often as not. But there is nothing like hearing chamber music when you're in the middle of it. Because a lot of the argument against chamber music, that is its smaller scale of sonority and its lack of color and all that stuff, just vanishes when you're in the middle of it. When you're in the middle of it, it's like really loud and exciting, at least as much as orchestral music is. But when you hear it sitting out in a hall, it's performed today mostly in halls that are way too big, and that distances you from something that really you should be in the middle of. You should be able to hear everything happening around you. And wow, what a difference it makes when that happens. One of the advantages to recordings is that you can sort of sit up close to them, and it ideally should reproduce that kind of sonority. Chamber music recordings that have the players in a giant echo chamber that are too far back are not legitimate representations of what the music is supposed to sound like. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. In a way, if you're not going to be in a room where it's being played, you're better off hearing it on recordings than you are live in concert, because the concert rooms are just unsuitable. They truly are. And unless you know it well and don't care that you're too far away and that the dynamic range is too restricted because you love it so much and you know what it's supposed to sound like, then you really are better off just staying home and listening to records. Because then you can put yourself in the right position with respect to the players to get the most out of the music. And that's another thing that I think might help you wrap your brain around the whole question of chamber music. And Brahms's chamber music particularly, some of it is just not easy. It's simply not easy music. He was not out to ingratiate himself. He wrote difficult music sometimes. He really wanted to. And we'll talk about that a bit too. And with that, let's get started. So first, let's start with the violin sonatas. There are 3 of them. They are lovely. They're not too long. They're like 20 minutes each. They fit nicely on a single disc. They are wonderful. Every great violinist worth his salt has recorded them. So there's a billion recordings of them. The other thing about the Brahms chamber music is that it's fairly easy to come up with an ideal list because there are just so many great performances. You really are going to have to work hard to find bad performances of the Brahms chamber music. First of all, the level of artistic accomplishment required to play it well is very, very high. And second of all, the players also are a little intimidated by it, so they're on their best behavior as often as not. I've chosen a set of the violin sonatas that I think probably many of you won't have heard of, but it's this one on on Erato with the violinist Renaud Capuçon, who's a wonderful violinist, and the pianist Nicholas Angelich. I don't know if you pronounce it. Who cares? Do not write to me and tell me how to pronounce it. I don't care, and I don't want to hear you tell me that you care. I just don't want to hear it. Anyway, the point is, it's a beautiful performance. There is a historical or quasi-historical older recording that's sort of one of the reference recordings also, and that's the Joseph Suk, Julius Katchen recording, which I would love to have been able to use here, except that I can't seem to find it. It was on Decca Legends. Where it is now, who knows? But Joseph Suk was fabulous in this music too, and there's a whole bunch of them that are just great, absolutely great. So, but this one is they're young, they're fresh, it's lively, it's beautiful. The works are very ingratiating. They don't pose any particular problems, and they're just fun to listen to. So, the violin sonatas with Capuçon and Angelich. Let's start there. Next, what have we got here? Oh, I have another disc of the Viola sonatas, and the reason I have it is because it contains also the Viola sonatas, which are actually the same as the Clarinet sonatas, but you can play them on a viola. I much prefer them on the Clarinet, I have to say. But this is a very nice disc to have also. It's kind of like, people kind of poo-poo it because it's, members of La Kosher Nostra, as they used to be called, Pinchas Zuckerman and Daniel Barenboim. The other members were Yitzhak Perlman and Isaac Stern and of course as an honorary member Yo-Yo Ma and some other Emmanuel Axe, but they were called La Kosher Nostra, which I thought was kind of cute and funny. But this is Pinchas Zuckerman and Daniel Barenboim doing the violin sonatas and the viola sonatas, because Zuckerman played both. There are singleton discs by every violist in the world playing the viola sonatas, and most of them are very, very good. But I chose this one because it's a handy way to get all 5 works at a very favorable price on Deutsche Grammophon. So Zuckerman, Barenboim with the violin and viola sonatas, if that's what you want. It's fun to hear the viola sonatas and the clarinet sonatas, which are the same works, and then compare them and see if you prefer them. That raises actually kind of an interesting question, because there is a sense in which Brahms's music, and when we come to the symphonies, we talk about the fact that sometimes Brahms was not such a hot orchestrator, which was true. He struggled. He struggled with his instrumental writing that was not for the piano. And there's also a sense that, like Bach, his music exists independently of the specific instrumental coloration that he decides to give it. And so it's going to work on a level as music, no matter what plays it. But on the other hand, you might get a sense that it sounds much better in certain guises than in others, because he just didn't seem to have that this melody has to be written for the viola, or that passage is just meant for the clarinet. I mean, they were, in a sense, but the music exists sort of independently, Bach-like, if you want to call it that, in his chamber works. And I think the viola sonatas and the clarinet sonatas are an example of that, and there's another one we'll get to later that's really quite fascinating. So there we are. Then we have the clarinet sonatas. Yeah. And the clarinet sonata and the trio for clarinet, the clarinet trio, are all contained on this fantastic BIS recording with Thomas Frost. Good old Martin Frost. It's Thomas Frost. I have no idea. Martin Frost. Pardon me, Martin. I'm so sorry. And let's see. And Roland Pontinen and Torleif Tedin. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful performances of the 2 clarinet sonatas and the clarinet trio. Gorgeous stuff. This is just a wonderful record. I can't think of a better one. And I mean, although every clarinetist worth his salt has done the Brahms clarinet sonatas, but this one on BIS with Martin Frost will really, really do you well, I think. So there's that for the major clarinet pieces. Then we have, the clarinet quintet. Of course, the clarinet quintet usually comes attached to the Mozart clarinet quintet, which is its obvious progenitor. And the one I've been recommending, and I just recommend it again, is this one on CD, which is just fabulously gorgeous. It's with the Pacifica Quartet and Anthony McGill. clarinet, and it is, I think, first of all, sonically absolutely stunning, and the performances are gorgeous and lively and full of vitality and intelligence and perfect balances, and it's just, there's nothing not to love about it. So McGill and the Pacifica Quartet on CD for the clarinet quintet. There's that one. Now, in case you want sort of all this stuff in a clump, sort of the oddball individual Brahms chamber works, there is this inexpensive disc on eloquence, and there's going to be some repeats here. There has to be, because when Brahms wrote singleton works, if you want an all Brahms disc, it's going to be with other singleton works, and you're going to wind up duplicating. There's just no way around it. It would be nice if I could just pick like one of everything, but you can't. So instead, I'm going to give you some options, and I'm going to give you some options for a couple of boxes too, that you may find handy, and an easy way to get a bunch of things in a very, very simple and pain-free way, so that you can sample and play around. But this is a twofer on Australian eloquence, Decca. You get the piano quintet, the clarinet quintet, the clarinet trio, the horn trio, which is marvelous work, absolutely marvelous work, and the variations on a theme by Schumann. That's a piano solo. And they are, let's see, so for the clarinet trio and the horn trio and the piano quintet and various other people, you've got, Andras Schiff and a bunch of people doing the clarinet trio and the horn trio. And you've got Andras Schiff and Georg Schulte in the Schumann variations, which is a piano four-hands piece. And there's a question as to whether piano four-hands music should be in chamber music, because there's going to be one other example. By and large, I think it's keyboard music, so I keep it separate. But here's an example of it. And then the piano quintet is with Andras Schiff and the Takács Quartet, which is splendid. And the clarinet quintet is with Peter Schmidt and members of the New Vienna Octet. This is a nice, full, chunky, richly endowed double disc of Brahms chamber music. So you could consider that as well, and you'll be in great shape. Now we come to the cello sonatas. I don't particularly care for the Brahms cello sonatas. There are two of them. And of course, every cellist in the universe has to do the Brahms cello sonatas. I find them problematic. I really do. It's the relationship between the cello and the piano that kind of gets to me. I mean, cello sonatas are terribly difficult to write. They really are. If Beethoven hadn't done a bunch of them, I don't think anybody else would have bothered. They are difficult because the tone of the cello and the range of the cello sits oddly with that of the piano. The piano has so much more resources than the cello does. And because the cello's natural range tends to lie low on the instrument, it's hard for it to really be a duo partner on an equal basis with the piano. And the result of that is that in a lot of cello sonatas, it really sounds like the cellist and the piano are playing two separate pieces, almost. They just don't mesh. It's really hard sometimes to follow a musical argument in which the timbral worlds in which the two players live are so dissimilar. And that's what I think happens with the Brahms cello sonatas. Quite often in performance, they're very difficult to bring off successfully. This doesn't mean the music isn't exciting. Actually, the second one, which is the F major one, I mean, look at the movements are andante, allegro vivace, adagio affettuoso, affectionately, with love and vibrato. And then there's an allegro passionato scherzo and an allegro molto finale. I mean, it's got more fast music in it than almost anything Brahms wrote. No, the problem is a question of the interaction between the cello and the solo. And one of the ones, there are a few that succeed. I mean, that really succeed, but you do have to be picky. I just like this one with Janos Starker and Georgi Sebok. I just think that they get along well. They really get along well. And for me, you hear that interplay between the piano and the cello that really makes it sound like a genuine duo. So I really enjoy this. This is on Warner Apex. It's just, I think, wonderful if you're going to do the cello sonatas. But these are works that I would suggest you get into Brahms's other stuff first. and save them for later, unless you happen to be a cello freak. And they exist. They definitely exist. But, they're tough. There's no question they're difficult. And that's just the way it is. And you may not find them so. I have friends who just adore them. Of course, they're cellists. So there you go. Next, the piano quartets. Now, the piano quartets are really marvelous. The first piano quartet is the famous one, because that's the one with the Hungarian finale. Cha 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 ba da da. And it's also the one that Schoenberg orchestrated in the most hilariously garish possible way that, of course, Schoenberg, with typical seriousness, thought was exactly the way Brahms would have done it. Yeah, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Schoenberg also thought that the future of music was, 12-tone. So much for his opinions. But the piano quartets are glorious, and there are many fine performances of them. They are also, though, the first one is just all joy and fun to listen to, and the one in G minor. Number 2 is the big one. That's the one that really, really shows you what your Brahms credentials are. I think it's fabulous. It's in A major, and it was written right after the first one. First one is Opus 25. Number 2 is Opus 26, and it's 50 minutes long. So, you gotta be in the mood. But boy, is that a terrific piece. It's just big and meaty, and you just sink your teeth into it. And the third is much later. It's Opus 60 in C minor, and it's the shortest and most compact, because as Brahms got older, he got shorter. He became more compact and more aphoristic, I think is the word. And I like this one with the Leopold String Trio and Marc-André Hamelin on Hyperion. It's really, really quite splendid. But we will see, because I'll be talking about a couple boxes. There are some other ones in here too. Some other alternatives that you may want to consider. But boy, is this fun. I like this because, first of all, the Leopold String Trio is marvelous. And second of all, Hamelin has a reputation as a kind of shallow virtuoso who does, very difficult technical things with music that nobody's ever heard of and plays the bejesus out of it. But I also think he is a splendid chamber music partner, and he plays his music absolutely gorgeously, and I think that he deserves a shot at being a Brahmsian, and he does quite well at it. So, Hyperion with the Leopold String Trio and Hamelin for the piano quartets. Next, the piano trios, and there are 3 of those as well. Now, the first one exists in 2 versions, because there was the original version, and then he revised it later on to sort of tighten it up. Most people kind of like the original, I think, a little better. Some people like the revised one a little better. I like both of them. I think they're both very beautiful. I tend to go with the revisions. I think that when a composer revises something, a composer like Brahms, who never let anything get published unless it was absolutely perfect, if he goes back and revises something, he knows what he's doing. He truly does. So you can pick it however you want to pick it. If you want to hear both of them, you can hear both of them. They're easy to find. But I like this set because it has the revised one with Christian Tetzlaff, Tanya Tetzlaff, and Lars Vogt on Undine. A beautiful, beautiful set that just gives you the trios. That's all you get. Nothing else. I think it's nice to get exactly what you want and not have to get more or other or different. And these are really wonderful performances by 3 soloists who have wonderful relationship with each other, but they're not afraid to take risks. And they're very romantic. They have a little fun with the music, and I think that's a great thing. The big trio to listen to, the one that really, is sort of the most exciting, is the C minor trio, number 3, Opus 101, which again is the shortest. It's only 20 minutes long. But it's a fireball. It's kind of like the chamber music equivalent of the 4th Symphony. If you want to think of it that way, a turbulent, passionate piece of music, just marvelous. So, and boy, these players really go for it in that piece. So Tetzlaff and Vogt on Undine for the piano trios. They're great works. Those are wonderful pieces to get started with in your Brahms chamber music explorations. along with the sextets and a couple other things that we'll talk about. My second one, along with the violin sonatas and the piano trios and maybe the piano quintet, you're in good shape. Very, very good shape. Next, the string quartets. Okay. I don't particularly care for the Brahms string quartets. I really don't. I think they're thick and heavy and overwritten, and they are not his best works. And I am not alone in that opinion. It is pretty widely shared, I think, actually. The problem Brahms had with string quartets was nerves, was the intimidation factor, the elitist factor, because you had Haydn's quartets and then Beethoven's quartets. Brahms supposedly wrote something like, 20 string quartets that he destroyed before he allowed one of them to be published. And the problem with string quartets by people who came after Haydn, and really even Beethoven had this issue. He had this issue in his Opus 18 quartets. There's a tendency to try too hard, to make sure everybody has something interesting to do all the time. One of the things that you need to keep in mind, and this is something Hans Keller said, and I think although he was kind of crazy, he was a string quartet teacher, and he was a student of Schoenberg, and he wrote a book on the Haydn string quartets, and he was kind of out of his mind. But he had one really brilliant observation that I want to share with you, because it's often said that a string quartet is, a work for four completely equal parts. They're always totally, completely equivalent in everything that they can do. That's not true, he said. What he said was a string quartet is a piece for four potentially equal parts. But along the way to those moments where the four parts are equal, you have duos with simple accompaniment, you have solos with accompaniment, you have trios. You can use the combinations of different parts. It's the combination, the color, in other words, that makes the string quartet such a marvelous medium. Not the fact that everybody's always doing something at the same time. And one of the problems that Brahms had, I believe, and Mozart too, in his late quartets, after the quartets dedicated to Haydn, was that there was a tendency. There is always a tendency in quartet writing to just give everybody too much to do at the same time. And the result is busy and somewhat monochrome and just tiring. It's tiring to listen to. And I think the Brahms quartets suffer from that. And in order to sort of deal with that issue, there are a couple ways to deal with it. There's a couple ways. One way is to play them in a yummy, schmoozy, relaxed way. One way is to do the opposite, to play them in a very lean, taut, exciting way. And that is the way that the Emerson Quartet does it, I think. There also, has a coupling, which is the great piano quintet in F minor. And the piano quintet, this is played by Leon Fleischer. Yay, the great Leon Fleischer in his two-hand, comeback. Because remember, he had focal dystonia and lost the use of his right hand. And for years and years and years, then he made a comeback with two hands doing select performances. And this is one of them. This is a great set. It's a great set. It makes the quartets seem a little bit less forbidding and a little bit less tiring than they normally are. But if you don't like them, you are in good company. I'm just telling you. Are they great works? I don't know. They met Brahms's standard in a certain technical way. But are they gorgeous? And not to my ears. Some of you may disagree. Brahms always said, you have to polish and polish and polish until everything is perfect. He said, whether it will be beautiful, this is Brahms talking. He said, whether the work will be beautiful is a completely separate matter, but it has to be perfect. And that's an interesting aesthetic position to take. And it's a position that I think you can hear him taking with the string quartets. He may have achieved perfection. Whether he achieved the highest standard of beauty, that's for you to decide. So that's my take on the Brahms string quartets. Now, the string quintets. You know what happens when you have an extra string player? Wonderful things happen when you have an extra string player, because you're no longer so obsessed with the idea of writing perfectly balanced polyphony and counterpoint with all of the parts always being equal all the time. If you have one more player, what that means is that you can have a full massive harmony with a couple people playing, sharing a tune, doing something. It just allows the composer to relax just a bit. But that relaxation makes all the difference. That's why Mozart's string quintets are the quintessence of his chamber music writing for strings. Not even the quartets. The quintets are the miracles of Mozart's chamber music. Schubert's quintet, right? And the Brahms string quintets, which are late works, by and large, let me see, yes, they're both late, Opus 88 and Opus 111, are in that category. I find them far more immediately appealing than the string quartets, but they are no less rigorous and no less musically dense. But the way that the music is presented, oh, what a difference. Oh, what a difference. And for some reason, they're still very, very little known. I don't understand why that's true, because they are lovely, lovely, lovely works, and you should definitely hear them. This is the Takács Quartet with Lawrence Powers viola, and it's also on Hyperion, and it's just terrific. Just a wonderful, wonderful disc. So do give the Brahms quintets a chance. You may be surprised. And you may also be able to use them as an entree into the world of the string quartets, because you're almost there, but just not quite. And I think that that really makes all the difference. I really do. So there. Then we have the sextets. Now, I've done a separate video on the sextets. I think the sextets are two of the most beautiful chamber works in the universe. They are almost orchestral in their richness of texture, because you've got 6 players now, and you can do all kinds of combinations with them and all kinds of fabulous things, and Brahms does all of those things. And they're beautiful. They have some of the most beautiful tunes he ever wrote, and they're just completely a joy from start to finish. And they're both early works. They're probably his greatest early works. I mean, I just think they're amazing. They're Opus 18 and Opus 36. Okay, 36 is kind of in the middle, but they are glorious. And this one, there are countless wonderful performances of the sextets. This is with the Mandelring Quartet on Audite. A beautiful, beautiful disc by wonderful players. This is one of the great string quartets out there, and you should hear their work. You just should hear their work. It's wonderful stuff. So the Mandelring Quartet, there they are, on Audite, doing the Brahms sextets. You will be oh so happy that you heard this, or really any version of the sextets. They're just gorgeous. And so now I have 2 boxes that I want to tell you about that you may want to consider. One of them is this 4 CD set on Sony. The Budapest String Quartet plays Brahms. Now, the Budapest Quartet was one of the great string quartets in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s. They played in the old European tradition, perhaps a touch relaxed, a touch schmoozy, as I said, very warm, very humane, very beautiful. And this box gives you get the 3 string quartets. You get the Clarinet Quintet with David Oppenheim. It's a fabulous performance. You get the 2 string quintets that we just talked about. And you get the piano quintet with no less than Rudolf Serkin, which is one of the great versions of the piano quintet, without a doubt. So this is a great way to get all of that music at a very, very, very good price. And it's definitely worth considering. So if you're not demanding the very latest in stereosonics or digital sonics, sound is fine. It's perfectly fine. This is a real important set of discs, and well worth considering for your Brahms collection, because it kills a lot of birds with one stone. So there you go. The quartets, let's do it. Recapitulate the 3 quartets, the Clarinet Quintet, the 2 string quintets, and the piano quintet. A wonderful way to get all of that music together. Yes. Then the next box is this one. This is on Onyx. It's much more recent. This is with the Nash Ensemble. And I mean, they're also a tremendous group. Remember, they made all those recordings for the CRD label. Do you remember CRD? I think it still exists in some quasi-existential form. I'm not sure. But that's where we heard them, and they've made recordings for everybody since then, Hyperion and a lot of other labels. This particular box, which really is wonderful because it doesn't really duplicate this one very much, it does a little bit. You get the string sextets, which are not in here. You get the 3 piano quartets, which are not in here. You get the clarinet trio, which is not in here. And you get the 2 string quintets, which are in here. So you would wind up with 2 sets of 2 discs duplicated, or 1 disc duplicated, pardon me, 2 discs with the quintets. But it's a great way to get some of the less familiar, people don't know the sextets as well as they should. The piano quartets, aside from number 1, aren't overplayed. The clarinet trio is a splendid work that doesn't get any exposure compared to the clarinet quintet. The piano, and the string quintets are also somewhat rare. So this is a great way to fill in your Brahms chamber music collection. So again, it's the Nash Ensemble on Onyx, Onyx. Absolute 4 discs, just like this. And between these two, you really get a lot of the major Brahms chamber works. Very, 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 very conveniently. So these 2 boxes are really worth considering. I recommend them very highly if that's where you're going. And finally, I need to talk about one other work, the Piano Quintet in F minor. Now, the Piano Quintet we've already seen 3 versions of. There was the one with Schiff and Takash, and the one with Fleischer and Emerson, and the one with Rudolf Serkin and Budapest. 3 marvelous performances of the F minor Piano Quintet, which is one of the great masterpieces of Brahms chamber music. And I think one of the reasons it's so highly regarded is because he only wrote 1, and there aren't that many piano quintets. There's no competition from Haydn or Mozart or Beethoven, and it's the same level of accomplishment in any case. And although Dvorak wrote a couple, and they are fabulous and typically underrated, but the Brahms Piano Quintet is like the romantic piano quintet, so it gets a lot of play. But this is another one of those works where Brahms seemed to have some issues with whether or not it really was a quintet for piano and strings, that is, for piano plus string quartet, because it also exists in an arrangement for 2 pianos, and it's wonderful. As a piano duo, it's quite fabulous. I happen to love the duo piano version, I really do, and there is a performance here. I'm suggesting one with Martha Argerich. It's with I think Lilia Silberstein. Let me make sure. Let me just take a peek. I will tell you for sure. And it's in one of these box things with Argerich, but you can get it. You can find it separately, I think, without killing yourself. Here we are. It's the Sonata in F minor, Opus 34B, for 2 pianos, and it's Lilia Silberstein with Martha Argerich in this EMI, now Warner set, which you can still find easily enough. I think the piece works just as well, if not better, as a 2 piano piece. I really, really do. I like the weight of texture that the 2 pianos give to it, because it's a very serious and passionate and intense work. And there are moments when I just think that sledgehammer power of having 2 pianos, have at it, is really unmatched. Others disagree with me strenuously, particularly string players. This is one of the works that I had the great pleasure of turning pages in its string version. And I have to say, it sounded pretty damn good as a piano quintet. And of course it does. It's Brahms, but the piece works very well both ways. And it's a wonderful thing if you get to love it, and it's a very easy piece to get to love because it's gorgeous. You will have a lot of fun comparing these 2 versions. The version for 2 pianos as Sonata in F minor, Opus 34B, and the Piano Quintet in F minor. That's really, really very, very cool. So that, my friends, is my ideal list of Brahms chamber music. I really think this should set you up to explore however you want to explore. But once again, I caution you, take your time, be fearless. Don't let anyone tell you there's something wrong with you if you don't like something. and see what pieces really, really appeal to you and work from there. All of it is ultimately rewarding. I think even the string quartets, once you really get into Brahms's style and get to know what he's doing. But there's no time frame. There's no emergency, and I think you need to just relax and enjoy, and above all, keep on listening. So thank you for joining me, folks. Take care.